A cloud of suspicion surrounds the deaths of Oscar-winning actor Gene Hackman and his wife, whose bodies were found in their Santa Fe home.
The FBI wasn't meant to stumble upon the tunnel. They were simply handling the scene where two older people had passed away when a forensics expert slid her hand over a bookshelf wall and sensed it shift. Hidden behind that section was a set of stairs plunging 312 feet directly into the ground. What lay at the base? A massive iron door standing 8 feet high, locked tight for years. Surfaces etched with markings that align with no recognized tongue. And 47 boxes packed with relics that defy explanation. But this is what caused federal agents to cut off all communication with reporters completely. A journal from 1947 penned in German, crammed with identities that were intended to be wiped from records forever. Breaking news. This is footage from one of the final public sightings of Oscar winner Gene Hackman, who's been a hermit in later times. As details emerge this hour, stunning new insights into the events around his passing. The listed reason for death is natural causes. But once you learn what Gene Hackman concealed under his stronghold in the New Mexico wilderness, you'll see why certain detectives think he carried mysteries to his death that influential figures never intended to reveal. The stronghold. And here's the thing. To grasp what supposedly rests below Gene Hackman's land, you must first get what sort of location this was. Since this wasn't merely a star's residence, it was constructed as if anticipating conflict. Now, I have to be honest with you on one point. The tunnel find, the relics, the markings. These elements stem from detective contacts and ideas floating among scholars. Some parts are confirmed via official documents. Others are still fiercely argued. But what we can verify is this. Gene Hackman and his spouse Betsy Arakawa were discovered deceased in their Santa Fe home on February 26, 2025. And that's understating it when I note the schedule was alarming. Betsy had in fact perished weeks prior around February 3rd. Her remains weren't located until agents came across both of them side by side. Gene's death was recorded as heart-related illness worsened by Alzheimer's. But the situation around that find, that's where logic started failing. Richard Castellano devoted 20 years advising on protection for stars, envoys, and top corporate leaders. When he assessed Hackman's site setups for a 2019 coverage evaluation, he instructed his group to verify the documents again. He believed an error had occurred. "I've handled consulates," Castellano stated. "I've advised for military suppliers. This land had setups that would envy some of those." Military-style caution turned into home design. The land covered 23 acres of thick, nearly impassable woods near Santa Fe. Soaring rock barriers 12 feet tall in parts encircled the whole boundary. Strengthened metal entrances barred the sole entry. Movement detectors spanned every path within 500 feet. Heat-sensing cameras monitored activity around the clock. The employees were carefully selected, fully checked, and tied by strict secrecy pacts. Anyone who labored on that site was barred from discussing what they observed, what they overheard, what they were directed to construct. But here's the twist. That degree of protection wasn't odd for a figure of Hackman's level. What was odd was what past builders recall about the building demands. Miguel Reyes had handled base construction in Santa Fe for 30 years. He'd created cellars for grand houses, updated old clay structures, laid cement for business projects. When he received the request for the Hackman site in the early 2000s, he figured it would be standard tasks. It wasn't. They requested cement barriers 18 inches dense in specific areas of the cellar, Reyes mentioned afterward. His tone lowered when he discussed it. "That's shelter-grade building. I inquired what it was intended for. They claimed storage." He stopped. "But you don't construct storage as if bracing for an explosion." Reyes got compensated 3 times his usual fee. He agreed to a secrecy deal banning him from talking about the job for 20 years. That deal lapsed in 2024. 1 year prior to Hackman's passing. And get this, when detectives eventually questioned Reyes to outline the complete extent of what he'd been tasked to create, he couldn't since he'd only managed one part. There were additional builders, experts who dealt with the lower depths that Reyes was informed never were there. The Discovery doctor Patricia Okonkwo had invested 22 years capturing the most horrific acts people commit against one another. Gang killings, group burials, incident locations that haunted seasoned officers for ages. When she entered Gene Hackman's home on February 26th as a member of the starting FBI unit, she anticipated sorrow. An aged pair, natural reasons, standard recording. She wasn't ready for what followed. Something seemed off right away, she stated later. It wasn't the quiet. It wasn't the splendor. It was the specifics that failed to align. Furnishings had been shifted lately, to have been rummaged through and quickly rearranged. Here's the thing. Either somebody had been hunting for something particular, or Hackman personally had been readying in his last days, concealing specific objects, moving others. The location didn't fit the formal account of two older folks passing peacefully from natural reasons, but the true find occurred when agents inspected the bookshelf area. Dr. Okonkwo was gliding her hand over the wood covering, searching for secret spaces. Routine method and valuable properties. That's when she detected it. A portion of wall about 4 feet across that echoed differently when struck. Empty. Behind that section, hidden so flawlessly it would have been unseen to anyone unaware of the spot, was a slim corridor. Rock steps smoothed by what looked like years of traffic wound downward into total blackness. The breeze coming up from beneath was chilly, moist, and it bore an odor that one officer likened to unsealing a grave undisturbed for Eris. It's not that straightforward, though, because the passage wasn't merely ancient. It had been strengthened with contemporary cement in some areas, new wiring lines along the sides. Somebody had been upholding this route lately. The passage spanned roughly 36 inches across and dropped at a sharp slant. The initial stone craft seemed to originate from almost a century back. But whoever made it hadn't simply excavated a pit in the soil. They had designed something meant to endure eternally. The issue was, what were they attempting to keep locked within? Dr. Okonkwo paused at the head of those steps for a complete minute before going down. Later, she confessed she'd thought about retreating, departing, acting as if she'd never located the section. I've been in scenarios where my gut urged me to exit, she stated. Incident locations where the threat was clear. This was distinct. The threat wasn't clear, but my physique recognized something my thoughts didn't. She proceeded downward regardless. And whatever that was, it was awaiting at the base into the shadows. The drop lasted nearly 15 minutes. 312 feet under the bookshelf level, the steps at last widened into a space that scholars have now labeled the safe room. And here's where it becomes wild. The area spanned about 40 feet by 60 feet, with tops curved in a manner that area chronicler Dr. Elena Vasquez recognized as matching Spanish settlement style from the late 1800s. Dr. Vasquez had been studying the site's past for years before Hackman's passing. What she'd uncovered disturbed her sleep. The site switched owners 7 times between 1920 and 1965, she stated, and each deal was purposefully arranged to hide the purchaser's name. Front firms, nameless funds, intentionally unclear records. She leaned in. That's not typical property dealings. That's the sort of record path you form when you're concealing something important, or someone. Her studies had revealed something additional, too. Between 1945 and 1950, 3 different land assessments of the area had been ordered. All 3 assessors turned in unfinished accounts. 2 of them departed New Mexico within months of starting their tasks. The 3rd perished in a vehicle crash 6 weeks after his last trip to the site. Chance? Possibly. But Dr. Vasquez doesn't trust in chances anymore. The space was loaded with relics that narrate a tale no one desires to learn. Piles of timber boxes aligned the sides, 47 altogether, per the starting count. Some had decayed with time, their items scattering over the rock base. Within one box, agents located a hide-covered journal from 1947, each sheet packed with names, times, and money amounts. All of it composed in German. Another held pictures, 63 shots, delicate and faded. Males in armed outfits that didn't correspond to any acknowledged forces from any familiar country. Several showed people whose identities had been blurred. Others seized places that scholars still haven't managed to pinpoint. Several showed people whose identities had been purposefully scraped away, removed from records with exact care. But here's what truly affected the detectives. One picture displayed a cluster of males positioned before what seemed to be the exact entry to this passage. Captured sometime in the 1940s, judging by attire and shot clarity. 2 of the visages had been precisely excised from the picture. Somebody didn't want these males recognized ever. And get this, the boxes were troubling. The pictures were more severe. But when Dr. Okonkwo's light beam crossed the distant barrier, she let go of her device. Because what was inscribed into that rock wasn't merely ancient, it was unfeasible. If you're still following, hit subscribe right now because what's past that iron barrier has never been covered elsewhere. We're about to delve further into this enigma than anyone has ventured before. The markings. The space barriers were overlaid with signs, hundreds of them, and they didn't correspond to any recognized speech or script method. Dr. Okonkwo captured over 300 separate signs during the starting recording. Her hands were trembling by the conclusion. In 22 years, she'd never reacted that way to proof before. I couldn't stare at them for over 30 seconds each time, she confessed later. There was something about how they were inscribed, the accuracy, the purpose behind them. I've witnessed things that would shatter most individuals, but those signs made me sense like I was viewing something I wasn't intended to observe, something that was viewing back. Some signs echoed old chemical emblems used in Middle Age Europe. Others appeared like engineering diagrams, plans for devices that seemed much too progressed for the period when they were apparently made. But here's the twist. A few aligned with star maps. Dr. Marcus Webb, a space scientist who afterward reviewed the pictures, devoted 3 weeks examining them. If these maps depict actual star locations, he stated cautiously, they would match a time roughly 12,000 years ago. Or possibly, and this is where it turns odd, 12,000 years ahead. He halted. The numerical exactness is impressive. Whoever made these wasn't speculating. They grasped orbital dynamics at a degree that would have been unfeasible in the 1800s. It's not that straightforward, though. Some detectives think these inscriptions are merely the quirks of a prior holder, a novice mystic with excess time and funds. Others propose they're encrypted communications, crafted to be unlocked only by those holding the correct code. And then there's the third idea, the one that disturbs scholars' rest. Some think these signs stand for wisdom that was never meant to be uncovered. Data handed through lines of hidden protectors who grasped something about our reality that the rest of us were never supposed to comprehend. If they're correct, all we believe we know about Gene Hackman just turned into a facade. But the signs weren't the most troubling element in that space. Not even near. The barrier that shouldn't be there at the distant side of the space, partly hidden behind a pile of rotting boxes. Agents uncovered something that halted them instantly. An iron barrier 8 feet high, 4 inches dense. Its exterior was layered in corrosion and filth, obviously undisturbed for years. There was no grip, only a weighty, rusted securing system that seemed crafted to hold something confined forever. One FBI officer who was there, speaking without name, described the instant they located it. We'd viewed the boxes, the signs. But when we moved those containers aside and spotted that barrier, everyone fell silent. His tone lowered. It wasn't just ancient, it felt ancient. Like something that had been lingering there before any of us existed. And there was this sensation. I know how it sounds, but there was this sensation that it didn't want to be unsealed. And here's the thing. The barrier stays locked to this day. No formal reason has been provided for why officials haven't tried to unseal it. The FBI has declined to speak. Formal declarations have been purposefully unclear, precisely phrased, almost as if someone is deliberately suppressing this. Some detectives guess the passage links to a bigger subterranean system, era of Cold War shelters, or even earlier armed setups that have been removed from formal logs. Others think it directs to an additional space, one that stays locked, likely holding whatever was too risky to keep in the external safe. A few propose the barrier was never intended to be unsealed, that whatever rests beyond was deemed too precious or too menacing to ever face light again. Here's what makes this even more disturbing. Heat scanning of the barrier showed something nobody anticipated. There's airflow on the opposite side. Whatever area is behind that iron obstacle, it's not a stop. It extends further below ground. How far? No one knows. The FBI won't reveal. And outside, scholars haven't been permitted near enough to discover. Miguel Reyes recalls something that still torments him. They inquired about explosion-proof barriers once, he stated. Factory level, the type you'd encounter in state buildings. He shook his head. I told them I didn't handle that sort of task. They said they'd locate someone who did. The closing weeks. The locals always sensed something was unique about the Hackman land. Maria Sandoval resided on an adjacent site for 15 years. She recalls one evening specifically around 2017. It was 2 a.m. My dog was howling at something. I stepped out and I heard this noise like large equipment but dulled emerging from below ground. She halted. It continued perhaps 20 minutes, then ceased. I informed my spouse the following morning. He thought I was dreaming it up. Her tone firmed. But I know what I heard. Something was occurring beneath that land. Other locals noted similar occurrences over the years. Odd shakes. Vehicles showing up in the dead of night without reason. Energy shifts that appeared to start from the Hackman site. One local who requested anonymity said they witnessed Gene Hackman himself outdoors at 3 a.m. on several instances in his closing years, positioned completely motionless, gazing at a particular area on his land. The identical area where detectives later uncovered the passage opening. And get this, past employees who departed the site appear to disappear from society completely. Laborers from years ago who just can't be found. Area scholars who started probing the site's background and ceased answering questions without cause. But here's what disturbs detectives' sleep. The link between that below-ground space and the passings of Gene and Betsy Hackman. Formal accounts state natural reasons. The health reviewer verified heart illness with Alzheimer's as a factor, but the timing seems impossible to dismiss. Betsy passed around February 3rd. Her remains weren't found for over 3 weeks. Gene passed sometime after, solitary in that home with his wife's remains. Protection video from outer devices. The sole video that remained, as inner captures were strangely damaged, displays illumination activating and deactivating in various areas during the week prior to his passing being located. Somebody was traveling through that dwelling. What transpired during those closing weeks? Did Gene uncover something in the passage? Was he hunting for something particular? Concealing something before time ran out? Some detectives think the pair was quieted because they knew excessively. Others propose the passage offered entry for someone to access the home entirely unnoticed. A few think Hackman himself entered that space one last time and what he encountered there ended him. The facade. The probe continues. FBI evidence groups keep examining every relic, every record, every sign etched into those old barriers. Dr. Vasquez has gathered a group of chroniclers, code breakers, and dig experts to review the openly accessible proof. What we've uncovered is merely the surface, she stated. The passage precedes Hackman's control by at least 70 years. The issue is, who constructed it? Why did they construct it? And what was Gene Hackman's connection to whatever mysteries it holds? Here's what no one wants to voice aloud. Some scholars think Hackman didn't merely chance upon this passage when he acquired the land. They believe he bought the property deliberately because he knew what was under it. Gene Hackman devoted his profession to depicting figures entangled in plots of intrigue. From the French Connection to Enemy of the State, he represented males who revealed mysteries that dominant figures wanted concealed. Males who suffered the final cost for knowing excessively. In Enemy of the State, he acted as a past NSA officer who comprehended that monitoring and mysteries were the true assets of control. In the Conversation, he showed a male overwhelmed by suspicion after revealing proof of a plot. Was this merely creative choice, or did he comprehend something the rest of us are only now starting to perceive? The manner he withdrew from Hollywood, the stronghold he erected in the wilderness, the protection measures that would envy state buildings. Gene Hackman wasn't shielding himself from photographers. He was shielding himself from something much more perilous. The passage is still present. The iron barrier stays locked. Federal officials have set the site under limited entry. Reporters who've tried to probe have been rejected. Data release requests refused due to continuing probe. But here's what disturbs scholars' rest. The site shift documents indicate someone has already submitted forms to acquire the land. The purchaser, a nameless fund listed in the Cayman Islands. Whoever they are, they desire entry to that passage, and they desire it before anyone else deciphers what Gene Hackman was truly safeguarding. The issue isn't if those mysteries exist. The proof indicates they do. The issue is, what occurs when that barrier eventually unseals? What do you believe rests behind it? Was Gene Hackman the protector of mysteries that dominant figures required kept concealed? Or was he safeguarding us from something we're not prepared to grasp? Share your ideas in the comments. Subscribe if you want to view more probes like this one. Hit that alert icon so you don't miss what we reveal next, because this tale isn't finished.